All right, so on the pre-show this morning, we're going to do something fun, and I'm recording it so we can send it to Jay and Gary. We've been doing Pivot Shift Ahead for over 4 years now. Daily mastermind call, a bunch of you on here every day. And we read through a bunch of Gary and Jay's books, MREA, Shift, and The One Thing, which is celebrating 11 years and 3 million copies sold. So I just want you today to share the one thing that had the biggest impact on you from this book. And then I'll send the recording to Jay and Gary if they're interested. But just go through, be concise, to the point, give us the one thing, the one standout thing this book gave you, the aha you've had, how it's changed your world. Mignon, you want to start us off? Good morning.
Yes, thank you so much. My one thing is that the mindset, your willpower cannot be on will call. So whenever I'm exhausted or whenever I find myself in crazy decisions or when I'm with other people, I realize that we're stressed and overtaxed. And what I love of this book is my intention is to read it. And I will read it 4 times a year. Once a quarter, I will read it or listen to it on Audible.
Yeah.
And it is all encompassing of the shift, the MREA, and the one thing. All of it is just in one book, and then Quantum Leap. It's all together. It's my favorite
Love
book.
it. Great share. Thank you, Mignon. Dean Moss, what's your one thing from the one thing?
Well, I remember our good friend, the late Jack Palance, on was it City Slickers?
I haven't the
what's
slightest idea, Dean.
Oh my gosh! Well, that most people don't remember Jack Palance. Anyway, great guy, a great character actor. What's the answer? Billy Crystal said, "What's the
Oh,
answer?"
yes,
Just
yes,
one
yes.
thing. Just one
Mhm.
thing. What do you mean one thing? But the thing is, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier and necessary. So when I read that book, I began to prune because I thought I put equal activity, equal intensity into a variety of activities, not many of which had nothing to do with my goal. And I've gotten leaner and meaner, somewhat cuter too. But the end result is you have to focus and you have to prune. And that's what I got out of that. That
That's a
one
great share,
focusing
Dean.
question. Thanks.
Thank you, Dean.
Let me
Leonore,
share.
good morning to you.
Good morning, James. For me, it was about counterbalancing because I was constantly trying to find every day the perfect balance in everything. And this book kind of, when I read that, it gave me permission to counterbalance and really dive in deep to one area and then, figure it out later on. So it's the counterbalance.
That's a great share, too. I love all this. We're doing your one thing from the one thing is the one thing celebrates 11 years, which is 2 ones. So I'm curious, what's your one thing from the one thing, Kay Condon?
Hey, good morning, James. Thank you. This book really brings it right down to focusing for me. And it's all the systems that we have, whatever we're doing, whatever part of our day we're in. It's the same thing that the 12-week year talks about. It's the same thing that you created in the Pipeline Challenge, James. Every hour, what's the one thing? Like right now, I'm getting ready to walk into the gym because that's the one thing I have to do right now to start my day. When I get home, I got things to do on the computer. Then Legion, what's the one thing right now? It really helps me focus hour to hour to get my stuff done, like Chris and Jungle said. Thank you very much, Jay, Gary, and everybody who had Vicky, who had something to do with writing this book, because it's really helping me focus. Thank you.
That's a great share, too. We've kind of adapted that to say, just do the next right thing. We talk about that on this call all the time. Just do the next right thing. Do the next right thing. Kay, thank you. Jim, what's your one thing on the one thing? Good morning. Jim? All right, William, you're next. What's your one thing on the one thing, William?
Okay, my one thing is that it helps me build a plan for the one thing I want to do. So I wanted to accomplish. So I just built a plan to say, this is the one thing I did today to get that done. Then I'm saying like this, then I look at it in a bigger picture. Okay, how is that going to get me done to do the one thing that I want to have done in 5 years? And then I look at 10 years.
Good jacket, Matheson.
Yeah, that's the goal. Hold on one second. That is the goal setting to the now. Hold on, I got to mute everybody. That's goal setting to the now, which is my one thing for the one thing. I love goal setting to the now, William, which is what you're talking about, the ability to take a someday goal and chunk it down into what do I do in the next 5 years, this year, this month, and so on. I love that. All right, Telly, you're next. What's your one thing from the one thing?
Good morning, James. Thank you for the opportunity. It's purposeful. It's doing what is purposeful when I need to do it for whom. What's the one thing I can do to be purposeful for my daughter? What's the one thing I can do to be purposeful for my business? What's the one thing I can do to be purposeful right now for my family, for my future, for my legacy? What is that one thing that I can do? And being purposeful in what you do to make your life and everyone around you easier and better. That is my one thing.
Page 114, it's the seven circles, Telly, and the seven circles help you chunk down and figure out. First, you can kind of rate yourself. Hey, where am I in these 7 areas? Everywhere from spiritual life to your physical health, personal relationships, and so on, business, finances. And then figure out what's the one thing I got to do to move forward, get closer to my goal. When I interviewed Jay a long time ago for my Positively Dad podcast, which I haven't done episodes of for a long time, but you can still find it wherever you find your podcast. And I interviewed Jay on Positively Dad, and that was what the page we talked about the most. That page has an impact on a lot of people. Telly, thank you so much. Bree, what's your one thing on the one thing?
My one thing on the one thing was how it showed up for me when my world was turned upside down. Just after I lost my sister, I was on the phone. I was a productivity coach at the time, and everything was all out of place and out of whack, including myself. And she asked me that question of what's the one thing you can do such that by doing so, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary. And for me, it was Legion. So that's kind of how me being more intentional with Power Hour and focusing on what I can control. So it just helped me get all things in order when my world was turned upside down.
I love that. What's nice about this book in particular is you can open it and it applies to any area of your life. It helps you get grounded and move forward. Bree, thank you so much. Cheryl, you're next. What's your one thing on the one thing?
Good morning, and thanks for letting me share, James, from Las Vegas. I think the biggest thing for me was just to quit thinking that multitasking is good and to really, again, like everybody else has said, what is the one thing that I can do in which will make everything else easier? So quit multitasking and just focus.
Do you remember back when they used to, well, they probably still do it, put in job descriptions as something they wanted was the ability to multitask. And now in the book, we realize, wait a minute, we can't really do that. We're switch tasking. That slows us down. It makes us less effective. Cheryl, thank you. Great share. Josie, what's your one thing from the one thing?
Good morning. So my one thing is that the reminder that success is simple, right? But not easy, because consistency isn't being easy. And so when I do my 411 every week, right, I always say that just pick your one thing to do today. So there's always a lot of things to do, but there's always got to be at least one thing that like I have to do in order to feel like I accomplished something, right? So we tie that with Atomic Habits, that 1% better. And so if you can do your one thing every day and get 1% better, that's your path to success.
It simplifies things. Yeah, I love that. Josie, thank you so much. Jack Smith, what's your one thing on the one thing?
Good morning, everybody. Jack Smith, Keller and Jay here in St. Pete, page 42. Doing the most important thing is always the most important thing.
I love it. Jack, you're a good man. Thank you so much. Kim Thomas, what's your one thing on the one thing?
Thanks. So good morning. So I think it's around maybe page 158 where it says to live in productivity. I think about 158, 159, and it's like time management. So in the book, they ask the question, like, what source do you use to manage your time? And most people will say, okay, I use a calendar or Google Maps, or not Maps, Google Calendar, Yahoo Calendar, whatever. But that's not what they're saying. They want us to go deeper on answering the question, what sources, what systems and tools do we use every day to make sure that we're always in productivity? So it's that time management, that one thing every day, make sure that I'm managing my time effectively.
Kim got the page number right. She did that straight legit from memory, page 158. Nice job on that. Kim, thank you so much. Donna Gilbert, what's your one thing from the one thing?
Top of page 35, achievers operate differently. They have an eye for the essential. They pause just long enough to decide what matters, and then they allow what matters to drive their day. Achievers always work from a sense of priority.
Yeah, we talk about that on here a lot, Donna. Thank you so much. Orly, you're next.
Good morning. So I always thought I was a great multitasker, and I thought that was a talent and a strength. And when I read the one thing, I realized that it's actually a detriment. So it really taught me to focus on the one thing that I needed to focus on and learn to say no to everything else because it doesn't matter. Focus on the 20%.
No doubt. Keep it the main thing, the main thing. Exactly right. We're doing our one thing from the one thing on the pre-show this morning because the one thing celebrates 11 years this week. 3 million copies sold. It's had an impact on nearly everybody on this call. We've talked about it a lot on this call. So we're just honoring the one thing today. You're sharing your one thing on the one thing. Latoya, what's yours? Good morning.
Good morning. So for me, it's the emphasis on the power of focus and prioritizing, stressing the importance of identifying that one thing that's going to help you, that one task that's going to help you get, to your long-term goals. And also for me, it's just showing up. Every day, for me, my one thing is showing up, regardless of where it's at.
That's it. Latoya, thank you. Tony, you're next. Good morning.
Good morning, James. For me, it's a number one line in the book, everything matters equally. Because that's how I used to treat everything. And we push a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this, and you actually didn't make any progress because you weren't working on what was most important, because everything does not matter equally. But for me, that was one of the biggest ahas.
Once we figure that out, it makes getting through our day so much easier. When everything matters equally, it's easy to get distracted. We run around, we chase stuff, we respond to text messages and snapgrams and the whole deal. And yet when we work, as Donna said, when we work from a sense of priority and we know what's important and we know that not everything matters equally, it makes mapping out our day a lot easier. Tony, thank you so much. Regina, what is your one thing from the one thing? Good morning.
Good morning. So I agree with everyone who says you can't multitask. I have to focus on one thing. And then also what gets me in that what I put to practice is the building of habits. It's not about a lack of discipline. It's about the habits and keep going with those habits. And if they're connected to your one thing, then success can be there.
Yeah, the habit thing is probably one of the most quoted things out of the book. Everyone talks about the 66 days. The book teaches it's like anywhere from 18 to 264 days or something like that, depending on the habit. But that sweet spot tends to be 66. Building the right habits moves you forward. Regina, thank you so much. Frank, you are next. Good morning. Thank you for being willing to share. What's your one thing from the one thing?
Well, James, thank you so much. And it's all about mindset. That first little domino is mindset to get you focused on things, and then everything moves forward. You keep your mindset right, and everything moves in the right direction. And that's your 10%.
That's the truth. Thank you. Karen, good morning. Karen Smith, good morning.
Hey, that's Karen. All right, there's a couple of us. James, I'm with you. I think it's the goal setting to the now. That changed my life in 2018 when I really sat down and started with what do I want my someday to look like, and chunking it all the way down, because now I know I can say, well, what's my one thing to get me there? How do I spend my time to get me there? What's getting in my way? The myths. I mean, it's goal setting to the now for me.
Yeah, I agree with you. It takes something that seems really far away and maybe even impossible and chunks it down to its simplest form so we know what to do right now to make progress. I've heard Gary say many times that we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 1 year, but underestimate what we can accomplish in 5. And when we do that goal setting, the now just chunks it down for us. Thanks, Karen. Hala, good morning.
Good morning. One thing is for me is like success is a short list, because when we have a big list, we are like distracted and we get an anxiety. So just to prioritize. And it reminds me when my son was studying for medical school, he was like so anxious. And they said, what's the one thing you have to concentrate? And I read this book one time and I feel we have to go from one thing to not, when we complete it, we'll go to the other one thing.
That's a good share too. Thank you, Hala. Vicky DeLuca, good morning.
I love that. Mine is little by little, just being intentional with the small things. And you have taught us this in the pipeline challenge, and that has helped me just to become narrow and just do little things to get to our goal. Habit stacking kind of, combined with that, but just not making it feel overwhelming just by accomplishing those little wins and then feeling really good and then going to the next thing, just little by little. Stay in your lane.
They say the way to go big is to go small, get really narrow, focus on the right stuff, and do it consistently. Do it better than anybody else really can, or actually just kind of know what your averages are and hit your averages. And Vicky, if you do that, you're going to win. Thank you so much. Jim, you're back. What's your one thing from the one thing, Jim?
I am back and hopefully working. So the one thing for me was the multitasking, and for me what it was is that with multitasking, I thought I was great at it. I really did, but it wasn't until I started tracking things that I realized how much time I was wasting. And now that I stay focused on the one thing that I'm working on, I realize how much extra time I have in my day to do other things. And it's just amazing.
You get time bought back, which
Yes.
is absolutely fascinating. I love it. I was listening to John Acuff's podcast yesterday, and he talked about that he was looking at this report. I guess Instagram will tell you how many hours you spend a week on Instagram. Did you know that? You can look it up. And he found out he spent 13 hours a week on Instagram. And he wasn't saying that was necessarily bad. He uses Instagram a lot as a way to communicate with people and reach out. But he also said that he could write an additional book a year if he spent the amount of time he spends on Instagram writing a book. And he already writes a book a year. So he could do 2 books a year instead of 1 if he repurposed those hours. Understanding what's going on, the time you spend, and moving it in the right direction, Jim, is so important. Thank you. It's a good share. Erica, what's your one thing on the one thing? Good morning.
Good morning, and thanks for the opportunity. So it's 2 words. It's you can. So like you accepting, meaning me, I accept 100% responsibility of my life. It's giving me the power to do the next right thing. And then
Thank you.
it's a sound. Oh, it's okay. Don't worry. The soundtrack, like you can do it. And so it's actually giving you that question, is giving you the soundtrack that you have the power to like do that. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Dr. Jerry, good morning. What's your one thing from the one thing?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity. When I read the book, it didn't mean so much to me because I was always looking for the results. I thought it was always possible. I didn't know it was possible for me to focus on one thing. But I took the challenge the first time and I failed woefully because I couldn't complete it. But the second time laid the foundation for me to be able to run the Chicago Marathon. And that has led to more marathons. And I'm really, really happy. I'm able to now focus on one thing and not have to worry about 10 things at the same time. So it helps me to focus.
That's a great share. Thank you, Dr. Jerry. Appreciate you. Sheena Patterson, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. So what everybody is saying, I definitely agree. I think mine is, James, my one thing for the one thing is that the one thing is a universal book. You don't have to be an entrepreneur. You can give it to your kids. You can give it to your grandkids. And I think it's beautiful. So you can teach them also how to focus on the one thing.
Yes, 100%. We talk about the one thing a lot in our house. Jay, Gary, why don't you let's do a kids version. Let's do a teen version of this book. Can we do a teen version of this book? You know what they're saying? Teens can read this book. It's fine. It's totally great. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Kristen Jungles, good morning.
Good morning. Mine is on page 143, The Power of Purpose. The prescription for extraordinary results is knowing what matters to you and taking daily doses of action in alignment with it. When my MAPS coach asked me in August of last year, what is the one thing that you need to do? It was lead generation, and that commitment of purpose to one qualified lead and or one appointment every single day has been a game changer.
Great share, Kristen. Thank you. Marty Johnson, good morning.
Good morning. Mine is when you say yes to something, it's imperative that you understand what you're saying no to.
I love it. One more. Kathleen Garden, good morning.
Yes, good morning. Mine, and this is big for me and has been instrumental in my whole life. It's on page 93 and 94 is don't fear failure. It's as much as part of your journey to extraordinary results as success. And the big last line was, don't let small thinking cut your life down to size. Think big, aim high, act bold, and see just how big you can blow up your life.
True story. I love it. Jay and Gary, thanks for writing it and changing so many people's lives. Congratulations on over 3 million copies. You're still selling them. You know what's interesting is when we book authors and speakers for our event, a common question I get is, what books has your community read that have impacted you? And the first one I mentioned is The One Thing. And every person I've ever interviewed says, that's a great book. That's a great book. They absolutely love it. I just put a link in the chat of an interview I did with Jay last year to celebrate the 10th anniversary of The One Thing. So if you want to watch that, you can. But Jay and Gary, cheers, congratulations, and thank you so much. You're the best.